Had a super rebellious teenage years. It was almost like I lived a double life. Brandon called me and he was like, when you get home tonight, we have to talk.
So was it a shock to you when he said that?
First thing that God told us was to sell our house and all of our possessions. Everybody's like, okay, well, tell us what you do. And he was like, a homicide detective. And they're like, okay, all right. I hear the realtor on the phone say, I'm not telling them that. You have to tell them. And he puts it on speaker.
Some days I just want to leave the office and go out to camp.
Come on.
Welcome to Changed Lives, a special limited series in which I explore the incredible stories of the people behind the scenes at Life Action, a ministry with a mission of reviving relationships through transformative events. Each of these individuals, my co-workers, have experienced God move in big and unexpected ways. And the more I heard their stories, the more I thought, people need to hear this. In this series, you'll get a first-hand look at how God is working in and through the people of Life Action, the challenges they face, the faith that sustains them, and the lives being transformed along the way. Their stories are powerful. Today, I'm talking with Sara Bishop, a woman whose story has been marked by bold obedience and a deep desire to follow wherever God leads. She helps manage the behind-the-scenes details at our camp, where her creativity and care help make each experience unforgettable for the families who come. In our conversation, Sara shares how she walked away from her faith as a teenager, only to encounter God in a powerful way at a youth camp that would change everything. You'll hear how she and her husband began asking God what He wanted for their lives, and how that question led them to make radical decisions, like leaving their home and family in Georgia and driving north with nothing but a few bins of clothes. As you listen, consider what it might look like to follow God into the unknown. Sara's story is a powerful reminder that when we surrender our plans, God writes better ones. Today I'm with Sara Bishop, and I'm so excited to hear about your story. And I've managed to pull you from family camp in the midst of a very, very busy season, and you have made time to sit down at this table.
Of course.
So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can't wait to hear
Yeah.
all about your story. So let's start by just tell us who you are and what your role is.
My name's Sara Bishop. If you hear anybody call me at camp, they use my full name all the time. Sara Bishop, Sara Bishop. So I'm the event coordinator out at camp. Love my job. A lot of different things, but basically all the pieces of all the different departments and all the people, and kind of organize and make sure we all are on the same page.
Yeah, you are a very busy woman.
I am busy.
You have a lot of things going all at the same time, and you do it all with a smile and a lot of passion and excitement.
I love my job. Yeah.
Before we talk about your job, let's talk about how you get to your job, but we can't talk about that until we learn where you're from and where'd you grow up?
I'm from just south of Atlanta, ATL. I grew up in Atlanta, and my whole life, lived there my whole life. After we got married, that's where we lived. So yeah, we have our southern roots. Living in Michigan was never really on our radar.
Never part of the plan. Okay.
Not really.
So growing up in Atlanta, tell me a little bit about that. What was life like?
I grew up in a Christian home. If the doors were open at church, we were there. So my parents have a beautiful testimony of how God brought my dad out of addiction and alcoholism and just rescued him. And that was actually after I was born, but I was very little.
Okay.
And so from that point on, he is on fire for Jesus. And so that's what I remember of my dad. I don't ever remember the other side. And my mom is the most godly woman I've ever met. In the Word, I remember waking up and seeing her in her Bible every day and praying. She would pray with us before we go to school. We would have Bible studies before we went to school. And so I grew up in a Christian home, accepted Christ as a 4-year-old. So from what I knew of Jesus, I knew I wanted him and needed him. And then just grew in that, had a super rebellious teenage years. And just tried my parents' patience like you can't even imagine. And but praise God that He brought me out of that too, and that they lived through all of that because that was crazy.
Also part of their testimony,
Oh,
right?
for sure. Yeah, the faithfulness of God when you have a teenager that's out of control. So, yeah.
Why do you think you rebelled against that?
I'm not really sure exactly what the reason is. I mean, I strayed from the Lord for sure. And then I think kind of once you pull away from Christ, it just gets a little easier and easier to get wrapped up in your sin. Um, I mean, there are some wild stories of like I would go off partying with friends, and my parents knew I was doing things I shouldn't be doing. They didn't necessarily know exactly what. But I do remember one specific party that was just wild, and it actually had gotten out of control with like I wasn't doing the drugs, but there were people there doing drugs, and they um like fights and all kinds of stuff broke out. So everybody in the house came outside the house that we were in, and my dad pulls up in the driveway, and like everybody's out, and I was like, okay. But I was very rebellious, and I was just belligerent, and I went over to my dad and I said, I am not going with you. No matter what you say, this is not happening. And he said, I don't expect for you to come with me. I just wanted to make sure you were safe, which was actually not my dad's personality, nor would have been like, get in the car right now. But for some reason, he didn't, which was probably God's grace, that I just wasn't sitting there fighting with my father. Well, then police were called and all this kind of stuff. So I actually got out of the situation before all of that. But my dad did not know where I was at that night. And he will tell you, he prayed for God to show him where I was. I mean, there's no way he knew I didn't even know where this house was before we were there. And so he prayed for God to lead him to where I was to find out if I was safe, and pulled up in the driveway. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah. We came through all of that. I ended up running away from home and crazy stuff like that. And I came back home finally because my parents had registered me for a youth camp. And I was like, all right, we're gonna go to the beach.
How old were you?
I'm gonna probably that time I was like 16.
Okay.
Yeah, because I took their car, so I know I know I could drive. Yeah. They probably should have like reported me or something, but
Ran away
yeah,
in their car.
right, yeah. I came back home and I was like, okay, I'm going to youth camp. And my mom was like, whatever, just go, because you'll be safe. I'll know where you are. Fine, go to youth camp. And, back in those days, we had pagers. So that was my contact with my friends is they would tell me where the parties were because of the pagers and all that stuff. And my youth minister came over to me. Again, I was so belligerent. I didn't want to be there. I was just like, I'm just here for the beach and the food. Like, that's it. And he came over. He's like, can we just talk? I was like, yeah, fine. And so we sat down and we talked. And he said, what is it connecting you to the people that you should not be around right now? And I said, well, the way they get a hold of me is my pager, because they're not going to call my house where my parents are going to answer the phone.
Right.
And so he said, well, what do I have to do to get your pager from you so that you're not connected with them? And I was like, no, you can't. And he was like, I'll pay you right now. Well, I'm a very frugal person. So in my mind, I was like, oh, yeah, he's going to pay me for it. And then when I get back home, I'll just get a different one. It's fine. And I was like, well, I mean, probably like $100 or whatever. He's like, I'll give you $100 right now if you hand me your pager. And I was like, done. Let's do it.
I'll be without it for a week.
Right. And he took it and he gave me $100. And I think that was the light in that it was the step in that God needed to go, all right, now you're separated from them. Now you can listen to me. And so within that youth camp, I started hearing the Spirit again, which I hadn't in a long time because I pushed God away so far. And he started speaking in my life, and I just had a total repentance moment of like, why am I doing this? Why am I living this way? I know that God is with me, but I'm choosing not to listen to him. Why? And so through that youth camp, the rest of the week, I mean, I was broken. And so God used it in my life, and I never went back to that lifestyle after that. So, yeah.
What was that conversation like with your parents when you got home?
So I called them from youth camp and I was like, oh, this is what's happened and it's so cool and and they were like, sure. They were like, I mean, great. That's so good. But we'll just see how that goes. Because it wasn't that I had done that before, but I was pretty deep into things I shouldn't have been. They really needed to see the life change. So
And so what was that life change like when you came back? Because that would
Yeah.
probably be kind of hard to pull
It was
away
hard.
from
Yeah.
your friend group
Yeah.
at that age.
It was very hard. But it was almost like I lived a double life because I still was going to church and I was still a part of my youth group. I mean, obviously I was not, it wasn't those people that would party with me, but then I would go party with the other people. So I think I just leaned in more to the people that I should be around. And then I didn't have that contact with the other people. I actually had people, they would like leave notes in my mailbox of like places they were partying or whatever. And my parents would, they get the mail and they were like, so there's a note in the mailbox. Do you want it or not? And they would let me make the decision. I don't know that they would have actually given it to me, but I'm like, no, I don't want I don't want a part of that anymore. So it was great. It was a great life change and really, yeah, I needed to get back to what I knew was right.
So as you're making those, now you're taking steps toward Jesus in your life.
Yep.
Are you seeing fruit from that?
Yeah, so soon after that, it was like the decisions of where you're going to go to college and what are you going to do with your life and all that kind of stuff. And initially, I wanted to be a teacher. And so I got accepted into college and went away to school. But again, at that point, I wasn't really, I wasn't deep into the sin that I was in before. So I just feel like I feel like it was a whole life change. But at the same time, it was kind of just like, this is a part of my life that I'm not going to be a part of anymore. And this is the part that I'm choosing. And so it did affect my decisions. My parents always taught us about Bible promises and that when you're making decisions, like God will guide you and lead you into where he wants you. And so if you're actually seeking him, he will show you the path that you're supposed to be on. And so I think that's where my life kind of went after that was, all right, Lord, what's the path that you have for me? Not just what I want or what I think I should be doing. Like, show me through your scripture what you have for me. And so, yeah, the next step for me after that was going away to school.
Isn't it so cool how only Jesus can like redirect the desires of your heart?
Oh, yeah.
There's no other way to explain that you're a party girl that goes to camp for a week and you come back and
different person.
It's different person, different heart, like
sure.
different, not even necessarily wanting that other lifestyle.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have nothing else to say about that other than to recognize it's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, and that it's unexplainable.
It is.
Outside of
100%.
Jesus. So
Yep.
let's talk about college then.
Yep.
So you go away.
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Went away to school. First semester at school. I am an insanely competitive person. Sometimes I have to tell myself, like, calm down. This actually isn't a competition. And so of course, all I wanted to do with my friends was like go play. Like, we had a volleyball court outside of our dorm, and every night the girls, I'm like, tonight we're playing volleyball and I'm going to dominate. Like, and they're like, we don't actually want to play with you because you're a little intense. But so I finally convinced them one night that we should go play volleyball, and we're out there playing and this group of guys walk by. And my one friend is like, oh, it's the boys. And she's like calling the boys over. I'm like, we're in the middle of a game here. What are you thinking? And so the guys come over and we start playing volleyball. And so then I have to like prove myself against the guys. Like, now there's guys in here, so I really have to dominate.
It's not about being cute. It's about dominating them now as well.
I have to win this because my friends didn't have the same. Yeah, they didn't feel the same way. But so they're playing, we're playing. I will say I did win. So, I mean, I feel like we need to recognize. But at the end of the game, this guy that we're playing comes over to me and says, like, just in case we want to play volleyball again, can I get your number? And I was like, I mean, yeah, sure, why not? And so now that's my husband. that is how it started.
Okay. So then he follows up. He calls the
Yeah.
number.
Next day.
Next day.
Yeah.
Okay. And you guys have been together ever since.
Together since. Yep.
And so where was this college at?
Georgia College
Okay.
in Milledgeville in Georgia. Yeah.
Okay, because he's from Georgia too.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then you're together throughout college.
Yeah.
Walk me through.
So we actually both went home after that semester.
Oh, all right.
And then we did community college from home. He actually ended up going to Georgia State in Atlanta, but we only lived 30 minutes from each other. So we both went back home and then so we dated for so long.
Really?
I was like, are you ever going to ask me to marry you? This is ridiculous. But he wanted to get through college. So we dated for 4 years until we were married. So
And your parents were probably both so excited because now everybody's back in Georgia.
Right.
Fast forward, you moved to Michigan.
Yeah.
So
right.
All right. So you get married, and then what's the plan for life?
Yeah.
At that point.
So he went into law enforcement. We had our first child. Well, before he was in law enforcement, he was actually a high school teacher, which he has a minor in math. So he's a fantastic teacher. He enjoyed that a lot, but it was really like the interim before he found a job in law enforcement. And so, law enforcement, we have 3 kids. Our oldest will be a senior this year, which is crazy that that's even possible. My middle child is 16, just got her, finished her driver's stuff, and then my youngest is 12. So he went into law enforcement, ended up becoming detective, really loved his job. He was so good at his job. So, yeah.
What was that like for you as the wife?
Yeah. A lot of law enforcement families, the main income is not the actual job, it's all the other jobs. So there was one point that like in a week time span, he was working 11 jobs. So when the kids were little, he was working so much just to make ends meet that he wasn't around a ton. And so that's hard. I would say, like, people would ask me all the time, like, are you worried about him or whatever? But I truly believe that the safest place that you can be is in God's will. And if God has that as his job, then he was more safe than any other place that he could be. Behind a desk, whatever, like that's where he was supposed to be. And so even he worked in a very dangerous area. They said like 1 year on the job where he was like 7 years somewhere else just because of the crime rate. And so he was in a lot of situations that were dangerous, but I knew that that's where God wanted him. So I didn't actually worry. We would see like news come on the TV, and I would like pause it when he would like when you could see him on the TV. And I'd call the kids in. I'm like, look, Daddy's on TV, but we wouldn't actually watch the story because you don't really want your kids to see that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So is that something that he wanted to like continue to pursue? Was that the plan?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The plan was to stay in law enforcement, go up the ranks as he earned them. And in fact, right before we were called to Life Action, he was named Detective of the Year. So he was at the highest point of his career by far.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. As you're raising kids through all this, like how did you see, you talked about being in God's will, how did you see like God's favor and protection over this time of your life?
In so many ways. I would say provision for finances, like when we needed something, God would provide another job, as far as like an extra job. And we would just see like, okay, here's the need. How are we going to do this? And then, the next day, oh, do you want to work this job? Because, they kind of divide them up between the guys. And so you never knew, like, are you going to have this job or not for extra money? So, I would say the Lord's provision with that. I also worked as a wedding coordinator, but I did it just like word of mouth. And I was not trying to be gone every weekend from my kids. And so again, when things would come up that was needed, or even like if I just needed some space, like away, then there would be the provision of, oh, here's a job for you to work on, and go do this weekend, that kind of thing.
Were
So,
you homeschooling the kids?
oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we've homeschooled since the beginning, which
Okay.
also was never a plan.
Mm.
I was public schooled. I didn't even really know a whole lot about
Mm.
homeschooling. But when it was time for him to start school, really preschool, I started praying through like what God had for us. And again, that whole Bible promise thing, I was like, Lord, I need a scripture that I can hang on to so that later when I'm frustrated or confused or feel like I made the wrong choice, I can go back in my Bible and say, this is how God spoke to me. This is what I was praying through, and this is a scripture he gave me, so that I can look back and not have doubt. Doubt creeps in so much. So when he was young, we started homeschooling, which then later we understood when we picked up and moved across the country. Like, it was such an easy transition with schooling,
Yeah.
because I didn't have to yank them out of the school that they were in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how in the world do you go from law enforcement down south to Life Action in Michigan?
Great question. Yeah, so Life Action came to our church in Georgia in 2017. The red team was there. Brent Paulus and Maggie Paulus were there, and Greg Simmons. And we had a thirst conference, which it was a 4-day, but it was, they tell you at the beginning of the conferences, like, clear your schedule and make this a priority. And we did. We were like, okay, well, that was really hard for Brandon and all of his jobs that he had. It's like, how are we going to get out of? So the shift that he was on, he asked his supervisor if he could take his dinner break and come to the conference, even though it was a good ways away. So he came, and we attended every single one. And I will say, like, I vividly remember the lesson that was on marriage, and he asked us to come forward and pray together. And I mean, it's like etched in my mind that Brandon grabbed me by the hand. He was like, "We're going," and we went forward and knelt, and he prayed over me, and it was a beautiful like moment of our lives that we can look back on and go, God did something really big here. And we can't even really pinpoint like this was the change or this is what happened, but it was a moment that we connected together and with Christ that I will not forget. And so it was impactful. And then just the whole conference, the things you're learning, and the lessons that I had actually never heard before. And I grew up in the church, like, and it's like, how are you not hearing these lessons on like living giving? Like, how do you not know this concept? But it was things that either I hadn't heard before or God just brought fresh to me. And so they left, and we were like, wow, this is great. And I remember him looking at me and saying, do you think that one day we maybe could like travel like as revivalists kind of thing? And I was like, yeah. I'm like,
Sure.
let's go right now. And so my whole life I had kind of dreamed of being a missionary. I remember growing up we had Girls in Action, GAs, in our church, which was it was solely mission stuff. So you would earn badges and do all this kind of stuff through. And so missions was just like ingrained in me. We would go on short-term mission trips and all that stuff. So my whole life I've desired to be a missionary. And he knew that when we got married. It was not necessarily his dream or desire. So I knew if that's what God had for our family, like, he would really have to work and like make that also Brandon's desire, change his heart so that it's not that he didn't want to go on mission trips or become missionary. It's just he kind of was set in his career. So
yeah. So was it a shock to you when he said that?
yeah, so that was when they were there, and then we kind of didn't say anything. Like, since then, we were like, okay. And so then in 2018, every time I had with the Lord, every quiet time, every passage, it was like every single thing was about missions, which is bizarre because, you're like, well, you're going through a quiet time book or a study or whatever, like different days or different things. And it was like I was like drilling me on mission stuff, and I was like, okay, God, like what are you preparing me for? So I just kind of kept going through it. So this was like a year and a half after Life Action I had come to the church. So it really wasn't even on our radar anymore. Like we didn't know anything about Life Action besides the road team that came to our church.
Right.
And so I was actually ironically on the way home from a missions committee meeting. Um, and Brandon called me and he was like, when you get home tonight, we have to talk. And I was like, okay, like, do you want to give me like topics, something?
Right.
And he was like, no. And I was like, all right. So I got home and he sat down and he was like, Sarah, God is calling us onto the mission field. And I was like, oh, I did not think that was the direction we were going. Like I had no clue what he was going to say. And he was like, my times with the Lord are just solely have been on missions. He was like, he's just been preparing me. And I'm like, me too. So,
Chills.
it was crazy. And so we started talking. I'm like, what does that even mean though? Like, what are we talking about? And he was like, I don't know. He was like, but I am telling you that I'm open and I'm willing, and wherever God send us is where we're going to go. And I'm like, yes. So, so then we started a journey of figuring out what that meant. We started looking, so we went and talked with our pastor of our church because we're like, we have
Right.
no idea what we're
Missions
doing.
is a big thing.
Right. Like, what does that even mean? Where do we even start? And our pastor told us, you need to, which is so funny. Like my whole life I've learned this. He's like, you need to figure out what your next step is. What is the next step that God has for you? And then from that point, figure out the next one and the next one. You don't have to know the whole picture. Just what is your next step? Which helped so much because I was like, okay, I can do that. I can do the next step. So Brandon and I just sat down and decided, okay, if we're going to figure out our next step, let's both seek God. We'll pray together, but let's seek God individually and let's see what he says our next step is. And once one of us has an answer, we'll tell the other one, I think I know what God's telling us or telling me. And then we'll come back together and kind of talk through it when both of us have something. So we kind of made like this pact that, well, then, we're both super competitive. So I'm like, God, let me have it first. Didn't always work that way. But we would sit down, and if we had something, I remember the first one, I was like, I think I know. And he was like, I'm not there yet. I was like, okay. So then I had to sit on it and like wait. I'm like, okay. And so then finally I think maybe it was like 2 days. He was like, okay, I think God's shown me. And I'm like, okay. And so we would sit down and then it was like, well, who's going first? Who's telling? But we would make sure that we had scripture to back it up. We didn't want to just do anything on feelings. We didn't want to guess the next step. And so the first thing that God told us was to sell our house and all of our possessions. And told both of us.
Well, that's not big at all.
It was just like, oh, okay. So that was crazy, but we were so excited that it really was not, it was like, okay, this is what we're doing. And so we contacted our realtor and we're like, we need to put our house for sale. And she's like, okay, where are you going? We're like, we don't know. But then your brain starts going
she told everybody back in the real estate office about
like these crazy people just and so we put our house for sale and we told our kids, we were like, we don't know. So that was a fun conversation too.
Right.
Like, so they were pretty little then. And so we sat them down and we're like, okay, we know that God has something really cool in store for us. I was the homeschool teacher, so I brought out my whiteboard and I had little rocks drawn for the path. It was so good. And I was like, and my son goes, can you just get on with it and tell us what we're doing? I was like, oh, you ruined my whiteboard moment. And so we started talking to them and telling them God has something really, really cool for us. We don't know what it is, but we're going to figure out what our next step is, and we're just going to do it. And they were so excited.
Yeah, it's an adventure with Mom and Dad. It was an adventure,
yeah. And so, and I said, y'all pray with us. We want you involved in, like, this is not just us telling you, but it did mean moving away from, well, at that point we didn't know. We know we were moving, but moving away from all of our friends and all of our family. And so there were a few tears, but it wasn't like sadness. It was just, okay, it's a transition. We'll figure it out. So we told them at that point, God has told us to sell our house and all of our possessions. And so we gave them, the black totes with the yellow lids. We gave each child one of those. And we said, whatever you can fit in this tote is what we're taking with us, aside from your clothes. We'll take the clothes. Your possessions can fit in this tote. And they were excited. And they were like, all right. And they went and packed their totes of the stuff they wanted to bring. And so I was like, okay, so we got that. We ended up, I sold so many things on Facebook Marketplace. We literally had a group of friends come over and take everything in our house and put it in our yard. And we had the biggest garage sale you've ever seen. We didn't really put prices on things, or like whatever we need to get is what we'll get. I think the hardest thing that I had to sell was my grandmother's dining room set. But it just taught me so many things about what's important. Why is this table important to me? This is not my grandmother. Why is this fine china important to me? I got it for my wedding. That's why it's important. It just sits there. If this is going to fuel us to tell more people about Jesus, let's get rid of it. That's what my grandmother would have wanted. Like, don't hold on to this. And so we worked through a lot of that.
Yeah.
There was a lot of working through that stuff. Put it all out on the lawn. Well, after a yard sale, we sold a lot. Most of it, actually. After a yard sale, there's always like the things that you don't want to have to deal with. So we're picking things up and whatever. And this guy pulls up in a trailer and he gets out, and his kids are like dirty and don't have like the greatest, didn't have shoes on, whatever. And he comes up to me and he says, I go around and I find yard sales that people are done. He was like, I will give you a donation if you'll let me take all the rest of your stuff. I'll load it up and take it all. And I was like, please take the stuff. This is God meant for you to be here to take the rest of our stuff. You need this stuff, because he resells it to provide for his family. And I was like, it was so cool, because it was like God asked us to do this, and then he provided somebody for us not even to have to do the dirty work at the end. And then the guy he was like, I'm so blessed by this. Thank you so much. I'm like, no, this is fantastic. Oh. And so it's just all the little details that just worked.
Right.
And every
because
time.
God was in each one of
everyone.
The details. Just unbelievable.
Yeah. And if you obey what he tells you to do, he will bless you. Mm-hmm. And we just saw it like over and over and over again. That was a little one, but it mattered. Mm-hmm. I mean, us not having to deal with all of that stuff is huge.
And blessing the guy with the kids too, right?
Right.
So cool.
Right. So that was our first step. So at that point, we did have a contract on our house. We didn't get rid of all our stuff while we still lived there. Yeah. We put it all out after. Yeah. And so we had a contract on our house, but then we still didn't know where we were going. So during that, we contacted a bunch of different agencies, like North American Mission Board and Georgia Baptist, like all these different agencies of like what does this look like for missions for you? If you feel something, like, how does this work? I kid you not, it was actually bizarre. It wasn't bizarre because God did it, but every single one of them was like, so currently we're not accepting missionaries, or we're currently having a restructure right now. So contact us back later. Yeah. It was just doors
no spots
closed.
For you.
Oh, just closed over and over. It wasn't, I don't think we were necessarily discouraged. It was just weird. We were like, okay, so we went back to our pastor and we're like, so this keeps happening. And he's like, it's all right. God will have somewhere for you. Just keep seeking. And so we did. Well, Brandon looked at me one day and he goes, wait, what about Life Action? And I was like, oh yeah. Like it wasn't even in our brains. And I was like, oh, maybe you should look them up and see. And so he calls up here. Apparently it was during a polar vortex. So the whole office was shut down. So we're calling, nobody's answering.
2018.
Yes.
Everything was shut down up here.
And we didn't even know what a polar vortex was.
I know exactly that time. Okay, I'm in the time frame. Oh, that was a wild time.
Yeah. And so nobody was here to answer our phone call. So then we're like, okay, well, maybe that wasn't it. Well, finally we get a call back from somebody. And they're like, okay, well, like, tell us what your background is. Like, are you in ministry? Are you this? Are you that? And we're like, no. We don't really know where we're going to fit in here, but this is kind of where we're at. So they said, why don't you come up here? They used to do like ministry fairs. So like if people were interested in coming to join the ministry, they would kind of have every department, whatever, and you would meet with all of them kind of in this little ministry fair kind of thing. But they get like 2 or 3 for whoever's interested, they all come at the same time. So like, why don't you come up? We're having one of these at this time. We're like, okay, yeah, sure, great. Let's drive to Michigan. So we scheduled to do that. Well, then we get a call and they're like, so all the other families that were coming up are not coming anymore. Do you want to still come? And we were like, Brandon's looking at me and I'm like, yes, we think. And so we came up, so we ended up having like this one-on-one time with all of these different departments. And so, yeah, it was crazy. But in the meantime, we had a contract on our house. And so we had to get out of our house. And we had no idea where we were going to live. We still didn't know where we were going to serve. So we had our whole church, our sending church is the dream church. Like, it was our family. Still is. They are the most wonderful people, and they just wrapped their arms around us. So we had 4 different families tell us, you don't have a place to live. Please come look at our house. We have somewhere you can live. I'm like, there's 5 of us, right? I was like, we can come, but like, we just need to all be at like, so we had our friends keep our kids. Brandon and I went and looked at these different houses. Like, there was like a basement apartment and all that stuff. So we come back to our friend's house and we said, we're not sure yet. We're trying to figure it out, pray through it where God wants us. And they said, you need to come inside with us. I was like, okay. So we walk inside, our best friend. So we walk inside and they said, you don't have to look any further. You're going to move in with us. Your whole family is going to move in with us. God's told us that's what's happening. So you actually don't have a choice. And I was like, both of us were like, okay. That was not even on the rate. They were just keeping the kids.
Right.
And so we're like, okay, well, how is that going to work? Let's talk logistically, because I really like logistics. And I'm like, let's figure out how that's going to work. And also, are we still going to be friends after we live together? Because that is a lot. And we still don't know where we're going. So we don't have any time frame.
Right.
Yeah. And so they were like, it doesn't matter. This is what God has told us to do. This is what we're doing. And we're like, okay. So within a short amount of time, we moved in with them. So they're a family of 5 and we're a family of 5 and we're living under the same roof. They had a bonus room that had a bathroom. So they put bunk beds in their girls' rooms that our girls live. So all 4 of them lived in one room. We were upstairs. They have a son and our son moved into his room. I had like a little table that was our homeschool area up in our little bonus room, and God blessed that so much. Again, obedience, he blesses it, and our families meshed. I mean, like, we were best friends before, but we are like inseparable family now. Mm-hmm. And so he created a space where we just jumped in and helped each other. And we would have times that we would sit down and go, okay, like, let's talk about how this is going. Are there things that are bothering you? What can we do? And it was fine. It was all fine. Like, you would think there would be all kinds of conflict, and it wasn't. It
just worked.
And we would just help each other. I'm like, I'll cook dinner tonight. What do you guys want? Or they're at the store. What are they? And God just worked it out to be like a beautiful time of friendship instead of what could have been like frustrating and irritating each other. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that was really cool. And so that was the time that we were coming up to Life Actions. They actually kept our kids while we came up here. So Brandon and I came up here, met with all these different departments, and everybody's like, okay, well, tell us what you do. And he's like, I'm a homicide detective. And they're like, okay, all right. Yes. So that was interesting. And it was really fun to watch their faces as we told people. Then we came down and met with the guy that was kind of over like property security kind of stuff or whatever. And he was like, haven't had a chance to really look at what you're doing, but let's just sit down and talk. We were like, great. So we sat down and he said, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm really looking for somebody that has a really great background in like security and knows like, that kind of side of things. And I mean, he just kept going on and on. And Brandon and I are looking at each other like, he just said he didn't read the resume. So, like, did he really not? Like, what is happening here? And so he was like, I just need somebody that can focus on this kind of stuff. He was like, do you have any kind of background in that way? Brandon was like, I do. I do. And so then he started talking about classes he wanted to give. It was literally classes Brandon had just been trained in, like all kinds of emergency management stuff and security things. And I'm like, how cool is this that God has prepared you in a way that you can use your gifts and talents that you already have to serve him and to serve a ministry in a way that we never could have dreamed of. And so, I mean, it just clicked. And so we had that conversation with him. Like, in fact, he does have a background in that. And so, yeah, so started working through that. We were given the green light to start raising support. And like I said, our church was behind us. I mean, they were our cheerleaders. Our pastor was our cheerleader. And within 2 months, Brandon salary was raised for us to get up here.
That's like record time.
It was crazy. Like, yeah.
You guys, I know what happened. You asked what's the shortest period of time that anyone's ever raised support, and you wanted to beat that.
Yeah. Nope, but that would make sense.
Yes.
Yeah, so we always say, like, our timeline is not God's timeline. And I just truly believe he was just ready for us to get here.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we did put a ton of work and we had meeting after meeting. Brandon was still working his job.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards, I would have like 4 meetings set up every night. And we would have phone calls and and we just met with people and just told them what God was doing. And they're like, how can we join?
Sure.
How can we come alongside you? It was crazy. And so we called up here and we're like, so we think we're at this spot. You let us know if you're seeing that on your end. Let us know what that looks like. And they're like, yeah, you are where you need to be able to move up here. So you need to come up again and we need to figure out housing and all that kind of stuff. And we're like, okay. We came up and we looked at 26 houses in one weekend, and every house was terrible. It was so bad. And we were not being picky. It was like, we just need like 3 rooms. We don't care. Let's just, and it was just not happening. So we finally found a house. It was like 30 minutes from headquarters. And we were like, this will work. That's all we need. We just need something that'll work. And so we went in the office, the realtor's office, to put our contract in for the house. And he was like, before we do this, I have one house that just came on the market. And he was like, I think I want you to look at this house before you decide. We're like, okay, yeah, sure, great. So we met them at the house. I really wanted like a super old house that was like, I could walk in and just fix everything up. When Brandon's like, we don't want to do that.
No.
You actually don't want that. So we walked into this house. It was a 100-year-old house that had been completely renovated. It was directly in the middle of where headquarters and camp were, which he knew part of his job would kind of be like checking the properties and making sure everything was safe, being called in potentially if things happen. So way better scenario than 30 minutes away. And the second we walked in the house, we looked at each other and like, this is it. This is the one. And so we walked through it, much smaller house than what we had in Georgia, but it was perfect. It was what we needed. And so, so we went to the realtor's office. We're like, okay, this is it. This is the one. And he was like, yeah, great. So he starts doing all the paperwork, calls the loan guy that we had already like gone, I had set it all up.
Right.
We had already gone through all the process. We knew we were good, pre-approved everything. And the guy, I hear the realtor on the phone say, I'm not telling them that. You have to tell them. And he puts it on speakerphone. And I was like, okay, what are we about to hear? And he said, I'm so sorry. You were completely pre-approved for everything, but then we found out how you get paid and that you have to raise support to get paid, and we're not going to be able to fund your loan. And we were like, okay. And then the tears and all the emotions. And I'm like, we've sold everything. We have nothing. What are we going to do? So we sat down and we prayed. And we're like, God, you got us here this far. This was our next step. This was the next thing you showed us. Like, please fix it. However, that needs to look. So I went back to our hotel room that night. I was a basket case. Like I was like, how are we going to do this? Went back to the realtor's office the next day and he looked at us across the table and said, we're going to figure this out. We've already talked to somebody else. We think they're going to come through, but if they don't, he said, we found somebody that will purchase your house for you and you can rent it back from them. And I was like, this is crazy. That's what we said the whole time. This is crazy. And so it ended up that didn't have to happen. The other loan agent came through, was familiar with Life Action, already had funded loans.
Yeah.
We later found out it was our realtor that was going to purchase it himself and sell it back to us, which is crazy. But he said, I know your story and I know how God's moving and I know that this is where you're supposed to be and we're going to make this happen no matter how we have to do it. So super cool to see how God worked and how God moved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So more tears.
Yeah.
Lots of tears at
Yeah.
the real estate office.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. So all worked out. We got in the house we were in. So that we were given the green light to raise support at the beginning of the summer of 2019. We moved up here September 2019.
Wow.
We had a couple of friends that, we didn't have a whole lot to move. We had a couple of beds and we had our totes.
Yeah.
And so they had like a little trailer that they pulled behind their car and they're like, we're going to help you get in and get you settled. And we really thought initially when God told us to sell all our stuff that we were like going to like Africa or something.
Yeah. So you really sold all your stuff.
Yes. So then we got here, we're like, okay, our house is empty. Like what? So God provided ways for us to have, a couch. Actually, a lot of people were like, here, we have this extra. Here, we have this. Do you need a TV? Do you need this? And so then we had all stuff that was new to us. We're like, okay. So moved up here, Brandon started working, just fell in love with everything about Life Action and the ministry and the mission, and just so thrilled to be here. But at the same time, we've left all of our friends and family who all sent us. Like they just were so supportive and knew and proud that we followed what God wanted for us. But at the same time, it's grief. Like we had to grieve those relationships of not being with them, even not being at the same church. And so the first year that we were here, I wanted to dive deep into work because I was like, okay, we're sent, we're here, we're serving. What am I doing?
Right.
Well, I didn't have a job or a title or whatever. And so I just came alongside Brandon and helped him how I could. But I struggled with that a lot.
Yeah.
That first year was really hard to go, I've just left everything I have. Why am I not on mission right now? Why am I not? And God very softly and kindly told me, your mission is your family right now. Your kids they don't have friends and they don't have people. Your mission this year is to be their mom and to love them and guide them and be there for them. You don't have to have a job right now.
Yeah, you have a job.
So, right. Yeah. So, that took a little bit of time for me to get because I was, I told you when I grew up, if the doors were open, we were at church. Oh my goodness. Like for my kids, if the doors were open or not, we were at church. Like we worked in the children's department. It was VBS director. It was on the Upward basketball. Like we did everything. And so it was a lifestyle change of not being a part of all that and doing. And God really worked with me on my identity of you are not what you do. You are my child. And so that was a really hard lesson, but a really amazing lesson to learn and so wonderful, looking back. You can see so much when you look back.
Yeah.
But for that first year to look back and go, okay, like that's why God, he wanted us to settle and he wanted my kids to settle. and for me not to be busy doing so many things that I couldn't help them.
And
So,
miss their
yes,
needs.
yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I prayed through a lot, like where do you want me to serve, Lord? Where can I serve? And then I was about a year that we were patrolling, is what we called it. We were patrolling out at camp, and it was during family camp. And one of the people that worked there stopped us, and we knew them, we're friends with them, and he looked over at me and he goes, "Have you ever considered working out here at camp?" And I was like, "Well, currently God has told me I'm not to work anywhere, but I'm willing to pray through that. I mean, what's my next yes to God? And I'll pray through it." And he was like, "Okay, pray through that. I think God wants you to pray through that." I was like, "Okay." And so, really just sought the Lord and again, I was like, "God, I need a scripture to hang on to. Please just give me something that I can know, that I'm not just desiring this, or that I just want to work somewhere, or I mean, everybody wants to be at camp. Why would you not?" And so, so I got a scripture. It was a few months, and kind of talked to Brandon. I'm like, "I really feel like God wants me to be out at camp." And he's like, "Okay, let's talk through it and see what that looks like and all this stuff." And so I sat down with them and I said, "You understand that where I am, my kids are with me. Like, we are going, like, I can potentially like homeschool them in the first part of the day and then work the second half of the day, or however that may look. But like, that's my number one priority. And if I'm there, they're there with me." And they were like, "Oh yeah." I was like, "Oh, okay." This is not really a conversation that I even have to have. And so I started working out there as the event coordinator, um, which there wasn't at that time anybody in that spot. And I was like, "Well, I've done events and coordinated and worked for nonprofit. Like, this is my wheelhouse." And they were like, "Great." And so I just kind of hopped right in, and I would homeschool my kids in the morning and then go out in the afternoons. And that's just kind of what our rhythm became. But it was very much a volunteer basis, and so then I had to pray through that too. Like, "Lord, I am working a job. Like, if 30 hours plus per week, like, is this what you want for me? Do I need to be bringing income in for our family? If I'm working this many hours, should I be getting paid for this?"
Sure.
And God clearly told me, "No, he raised enough money for us. The Lord raised the money when we came to support our family, and we came here on mission. Why would I need to put any more towards that?" So, for the first few years that I served out there was not a paycheck that came in with it, and it was totally fine. Like, there was no problem with that, and it was actually beautiful because I knew that God would take care of every single thing that we need. He always did too. I mean, there's like story after story of things that we need, or bills that came in, or there's a medical bill that came in one time, and I looked at Brandon and I was like, "What are we gonna do?" Like, we got really, really sick with COVID. Like, I almost died with COVID. And so hospital bills and all kinds of stuff were coming in, and we looked at each other and we're like, "How are we gonna pay this?" Like, literally, that's not there. The day that I will never forget this. The day this one bill came in, we looked at each other and he said, "Sarah, God is going to provide for us." And I was like, "I know, but how?" And we went to the mailbox that day, and a check, the exact amount of the bill, was in our mailbox. And I was like, this is crazy." And so it is crazy to think of how God's provision, like, you just have to trust him with it, and he will provide every single time in ways that you won't imagine. This person that sent this check had no idea. They listened to God and obeyed him to do what he asked them to do, and had no idea the need that they were going to meet for us.
Does it get easier trusting?
The history is there, and I do think that um that God is like, "Just trust me. Just remember what I've done." But I think I'm just amazed every single time. And it's not that I don't trust, because I do have that history. It's just that every single time it's just a miracle. And you're like, how can you not just be blown away by a miracle every time. But there are times of like disbelief that I'm like, there's no way we can do this. How are we going to do this? We can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, that's when Brandon's like, do you remember that? Do you remember that God's met us every time?
Right.
I'm like, yeah, I know. Okay. Yeah. So now I still serve out at the camp, event coordinator, full time. Summers are full time plus.
Yes.
But I get to serve alongside my kids. I have 2 kids that work crew now. And so they work all 10 weeks of camp. Their heart for missions is what I've always longed for my kids to have. And they're so happy doing it.
Yeah.
My youngest is my shadow at camp, and she helps in every single way, which is phenomenal. And then this year she's been able to jump in and serve in different ways because she's a little bit older now too. So it's been such a cool journey of where God had us and where he's brought us, and just looking back and seeing like all the different ways he just laid out perfectly. When we moved to Michigan and we picked up in our homeschool, and we're like, okay, now we do it here. And I mean, just the different aspects that he wove together before we could ever know that that's what he's doing. Our house, the job, like every single thing is just perfectly how he had it aligned. So, yeah.
And your obedience to that is paramount too, right? Like, and that's probably a lesson that you're teaching your kids through them experiencing it.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that they've said, or like how are they processing this?
Yeah. Well, I think it was hard. It was very hard. At
Yeah.
first, well, when we first told them, and I had, my whiteboard meeting, they were like, my youngest was like, so am I going to be featured in a missionary magazine? Was like, probably not. Maybe, I don't know.
All right, now I have a mission to get in the next newsletter.
Right. Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. Little did they know we're going to put out a newsletter all the time, and you'll be featured. Yeah. And so that was like comical things that went through. I think it's the grief process of losing your house and losing your stuff, but we never really looked at it as like losing it. It was like, this is our next step, and this is how God is moving us. And so it was all very exciting, but at the same time, you like are holding both emotions of like, we're so excited to do this, but also like this is what we're losing. So the hardest part for all of us by far was losing our friends and our family and being close to them. I was at my mom's house probably twice a week at least.
Yeah.
And that was hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard to move away from that. And just the separation alone causes a different relationship to form. So that was hard for the kids, and even finding new friends was hard. But yeah, they did eventually. That was my prayer always. Lord, just provide people for my kids that they can have friendships again.
And crew helps with that.
Oh man. Yeah. Some of their very best friends are crew or staff kids, like the kids of other staff, because we're all around all the time. Yeah, exactly. And they've moved away from their friends too. So yeah, God has provided some really sweet friends for them.
That is like the uncounted cost of being stateside missionaries.
Yep.
Just the fact that you're hours and hours away from your original community.
Yes.
And just that could create some stressors.
Oh,
like tolls. And so to have another community to be a part of takes time, but it's so important.
Yeah.
So something I'm curious about, because you talked about your really transformative experience at youth camp, and now you serve at camp.
Yeah.
So talk about how does that hit you, or do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, not often, but I do know that at camp, I mean, I read the testimonies that come in. We have a testimony night every Friday, and the testimonies that I hear of the life change that happens at camp fuels me to keep going, because God works in unimaginable ways there. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of it. We say all the time, we get to do this. Like, it's not... It is hard work and long hours, but it is such a rewarding place to be, to know that the work that you're doing matters for the kingdom. And not even just the guest, though, it's the crew that come in that I love those kids. And
they love you.
joke around. Someone told me that they're like, do you think that they think you're their friend? I was like, yes. But I think that getting to pour into those kids, maybe that is the connection, is that like I just want them to feel loved and valued and have even community, even if they're working 2 or 3 weeks, like come serve here with us and see the impact that you can make and see what impact can be made on you this week through serving. So yeah, it's amazing, but I love every second of all of it. Yeah. The other day, Brandon, so like week 1 of family camp is wild and the hours are like crazy. So the week 1, I was probably working like 15-hour days at least. And so Brandon came into my office and I had, back to the whiteboard again. I had mapped out this whole schedule of like, this is when I'm going to be and these are the hours. And he goes, what is that up there? And I was like, it's my schedule. And he just burst into laughter. But I would say like we want to be there. It's not it is a job, but it is a mission. And that there's nothing that could keep me away from doing the things that God has me doing out there. And I'm just so grateful.
Yeah.
Like honestly, to be where we were and be called into this, like I just feel like it's such a privilege.
Oh, Sarah, your passion comes through. Like in everything you do. Not just in this interview. When you're talking with crew at chapel each week, when you're welcoming families, when you're sharing about it on social media, it's obvious this is where God has you for a purpose. So I want to talk about when you are in your quiet time with God, or you're thinking about your purpose at camp, because you could easily get caught up in the doing.
Oh, 100%.
But you've hinted at like the transformation that's happening. And so I'm going to ask you this question. I don't want the Life Action tagline version. I want the Sara Bishop version of what do you think your mission is out there? And I know you talked a little bit about the crew, which I fully agree with.
Yeah.
For these families that are coming in, why does God have you there? And what is your mission there?
That's an easy answer. Okay. I believe that through all the different things that I do, all the work that I put in is just creating a place and an environment for them to experience God, whatever that means for that week. So if that's me running a session in the tab and I'm noticing that people are cold, then I go adjust the air. But that could create a space where they're not distracted by being cold. They can actually hear what the speaker is saying and listen to the spirit of how they need to move. So I fully believe that my job is just to create that space and then let God do his work.
That's great. That's a great answer. I want to talk a little bit about the mother-daughter retreats.
Okay.
Because I know those, we talked about family camp.
Yes.
But we also have retreats, and you're a big part of the retreats out there that we have in the spring and we have in the fall.
Yep.
And as part of this podcast, we haven't really touched on those as much, but I know the mother-daughter retreat holds a really special place in your heart.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, our mother-daughter retreat is so fun. Like it is just wildly fun with your mom. And so again, it's creating that space, but it's just such a different way than family camp. We have like mom and me canvas paintings. We have what our desire is every single thing is to draw the mom and daughter closer together so that they can seek the Lord. It is just wildly fun. Dance parties, like it reminds me of like a slumber party kind of thing with your mom for a whole weekend. And at the same time, you're just learning all about Christ. And it's focused on the girls and for the mom to come alongside her daughter and learn these valuable lessons with her and teach her and encourage her so that she can grow to be the girl that God has her to be. So yeah, that I am passionate about the mother-daughter. Love the father-son too. I love father-son. Momentum is our guys' retreat. They go all out with momentum. You know, all the manly things. All the bacon. They cook so much bacon. Yeah. But Thrive, the ladies' retreat, is like my absolute favorite.
Okay, why is that?
I think when you have a bunch of women together, people have like in their minds what that would be and like if it would be catty or whatever. And it's so not that. it is a beautiful group of women that come together to seek the Lord, to have fun. And I often get to MC those retreats. And I tell those women as we start off that they're all my new best friends. And then I end up leaving with best friends. And I just love the time together and just seeing how God works in their life. There's I think you recorded a testimony recently of a lady that came to Thrive just broken and desperate. And when she left, God did a huge work in her life. And she is a different person now. And I just love seeing, I think maybe I connect with them more because a lot of times moms, if you have your whole family with you, or even if you have just your daughter with you, you're concerned about all of them. And
You're in mom mode.
yeah. And so when it's just the ladies retreat, I can connect with the woman. And she doesn't have necessarily all that stuff right with her. And I just think it's a beautiful time for them to be able to just kind of take a breath.
Yeah.
And just be. And we also have bacon at that retreat.
Some good food.
Just to clarify.
You touched on the time for moms to set aside. It's hard for moms to do. Right? I mean, it's a weekend, but it's still a weekend. Who's going to take care of my kids? Who's going to pick them up here? Who's going to cook dinner for them? So why do you think that intentional set aside time is so important for women?
Yeah, I think you have to do that. And I think probably for moms and even wives, like leaving your husband sometimes, or I don't think it necessarily has to be a mom, but any responsibility that you have. I think that putting that aside and coming somewhere where you can just focus on your relationship with Christ is vital. Like, you have to be able to do that somewhere, sometime. If it's not with us, that's fine. We want it. We want that for anybody, anywhere. But I think they have to do that to just refocus and recenter and know that God actually cares for them while they're caring for everybody else. But let's put them aside for a second and let God just speak to you.
That's great. Yeah. I like how you put that. That God is and wants to care for them while they're caring for everybody else. Because it can be hard to put those blessings and burdens.
So hard.
Every Friday,
be
poured into.
For sure. Every Friday at those retreats. I mean, specifically, we pray that God takes care of everybody that they left behind and that they are able to not focus on that so that they can hear directly from the Lord that weekend.
Yeah, it's amazing that these intentional disruptions of your everyday rhythm, how God uses those to create those like holy disruptions in the heart.
Yeah.
Right? You could have those anywhere, sure, but it's just like you almost have to step outside and put those things down so that you can be open to, like, God's always speaking to you, but you just gotta, the busyness and the noise has to go away a little bit sometimes for that. You get a front row seat to transformation every single week. Does it ever get old?
No.
Or is it always?
It's always
incredible?
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It brings tears to my eyes right now.
Yeah. I'm sure, because you've been out there for years now. Do stories come to mind or families come to the forefront where you think, wow, God is just really doing a work?
Yeah, I think the ones that are like, you always think of the big things like marriages that have been restored. They come in at the beginning of the week ready to file for divorce, and then they leave.
People would be surprised that that's relatively common.
It is.
Yeah.
And by the end of the week, it's all about restoration and it's their willingness to let God work throughout the week. Or even the stories of, like, I remember one specific that put on their testimony card that their family could not get along. Like, nothing they did. They fought all the time. They couldn't even be in the same room with each other because they just didn't like each other. And they went into the escape room, and through the escape room, God did something amazing in their family where they had to work together and they had to figure these things out. And by the end of it, they're all like weeping because they did it. They were a family and they worked together and they did what they had to do. And it was a pivotal moment that God used something in an activity, which he often does at camp.
Yeah.
Uses nature, uses the lake, uses the blob, uses something that you wouldn't necessarily think. But again, that space was created that they had to work together. And then they left camp like restored as a family. And you just wonder, like, if they didn't come to camp, if they didn't sign up for the escape room, but God orchestrated it all so that they could then hear the messages and know how to build their family back together. So just this year already, there was somebody last week that gave a testimony that they kind of were just far from God, not really even hearing. And ironically, it was someone that used to be a team member that traveled with Life Action. So they're like, we know all the things. We know all the lessons. We've heard from it. We taught it as children's ministers. And they were like, we just were so far from the Lord and didn't actually think they needed family camp. They just were coming because it sounded good and they'd been as familiar. And then God used the week to just draw them in. And they said they have a fresh relationship with the Lord and they're leaving feeling restored and refreshed and like different people than when they came. Yeah.
Camp ministry can be a really powerful ministry.
Yeah.
And it's common to have an experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I know something that we really try to bake in is that it can kind of be a spark
Yep.
to the transformation, but it's that continual spiritual formation. And how are you going to continue this process when you get home?
Right.
And hopefully welcoming them back the next year to continue that. Because so many of our families are repeat.
Yep. Seeing the new families come in, I mean, it like hypes us up.
Yeah,
like, come on.
Sure. Yeah.
It's good.
Well, I'm sure that Friday nights at camp are your favorite nights.
For sure.
With the testimonies. And I've heard there are some phenomenal ones this year.
Yep.
So that's exciting for all of us because that's what we celebrate.
Yep.
And it's nothing that we do.
No.
Like you said, it's not the activities we create. It's not the games that we come up with or the messages. It's just asking God into those spaces. And God does the work.
Right. Always.
We just show up.
Yep. Literally. We're here.
Yeah.
Use it how you want. Yeah.
When you think about our ministry and something that your family literally sold everything and came up here for, what are your prayers for our ministry? Like, when you're talking with Jesus, like, what are your prayers for us?
I just want God to keep doing what he's doing. And I pray that he lets us continue to be a part of that. I know he works in amazing ways through amazing different ministries. And I just think that I think what Life Action has is a good thing. And a good space and a place and good just biblical values that my prayer is that he just continues to use us. And if he decides not to, that he figures out a way that he can use us somewhere else. But that is my prayer, is that he would just allow us to keep going and continue to be with us in that journey, because we can't do it without him. So
Years from now, when you look back and the ministry that you've brought your whole family to and all of you are really serving in, what do you hope is your lasting legacy here? What do you hope you leave behind?
I don't really know. I don't know that I care about my legacy. I care about the work that's happening, and I'm grateful that I get to be a part of it. I would just prefer not to be known.
What do you hope that when your people, when they think about Sara Bishop, what do you hope they think?
Yeah, I hope they know the reason I do this is because I love Jesus and nothing else.
That's pretty evident. It's really, it comes out of you.
Thank you.
In everything that you do. And you pour your whole heart and soul into not just the camp, but the people out there. And I just want to recognize that. And And you do it in a really fun way. And you do a lot of call and response.
Yes.
And I want to be a part of
Yeah.
it.
Come on.
I mean, you make it fun. Make it real fun. Some days I just want to leave the office
Yeah.
and go out to camp.
Come on. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me and sharing your story. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening to this episode of Changed Lives. If you are encouraged or inspired by what you heard, I want to invite you to take the next step. You can support the people whose story you just heard and others like them by visiting lifeaction.org/changedlives. Whether through prayer, giving, or sharing these stories, you can be part of what God is doing to revive relationships and transform lives.